my husband came home late from work. There was a pair of lace panties stuffed into the hood of his down jacket. He didn't know. I didn't say anything. The next day, he put on that same jacket and went to work as usual. The only difference was this: I quietly tugged a bit of the lace edging out of the hood. If he wanted to play that boldly, the least I could do was let everyone get a good look. Chapter 1. When Chad came home from working late, it was already 1 in the morning. The living room light clicked on with a sharp snap when he flipped the switch. Still half asleep, I wandered out just in time to see him shrug off his down jacket and toss it onto the couch. "Did I wake you?" he asked. At 6 that evening, Chad had called to let me know he'd be working late and probably wouldn't be home until much later. I shook my head and gently pushed him toward the bathroom to wash up. That was when I caught it, a faint, sweet scent that didn't belong to him. I frowned, leaning against the sink as I watched him. "Working alone tonight?" I asked. "Not really," he said. "Everyone else left around midnight. I just stayed a bit longer." "What's wrong?" His answer was easy, unguarded. I couldn't hear a crack in it. I let out a dry little laugh and stepped out of the bathroom. I straightened his shoes by the door, then went back to the couch to pick up his jacket. I spread it open, lifted the hood, getting ready to hang it on the rack by the door. That was when I saw it, a pair of lace panties, crumpled and completely out of place, stuffed deep inside the hood. My heart dropped. Almost instantly, I pulled my hand back. The jacket slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. It didn't make much noise, but it felt like a bomb going off. My mind went blank, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. "Honey, can you grab me a towel in a minute?" Chad called, poking his head out of the bathroom. I turned around in a daze. My mouth opened, but it took a long moment before I managed to say, "Okay. In a bit." Chapter 2. While Chad was in the shower, I stood frozen beside the couch, lost in thought. It felt as if an invisible hand were squeezing my heart tight, making it hard to breathe. Tears welled up uncontrollably, blurring my vision. Some things didn't make sense to me. I couldn't understand how something like this could happen at all. Especially between Chad and me. We had survived the breakup season after graduation, endured years of long distance, and after everything, we had been married for 5 years now. I glanced at the medical report I had deliberately left on the coffee table before going to bed. Silently, I tore it up and dropped the pieces into the trash. Then I picked up the down jacket from the floor and placed it back on the couch. I didn't take the panties out. They stayed exactly the way they had been stuffed inside before. Chad didn't know. I didn't say anything. If there was any difference at all, it was that I quietly tugged a bit of the lace trim out of the hood. Just a little. It would be hard to notice at a glance, but anyone paying even slight attention would catch it. So the next morning, Chad did what he always did, grabbed the jacket and slipped it on without a second thought. Before leaving, he even reminded me, "If I have to work late tonight, I'll let you know ahead of time." I held my smile in place. I watched him step into the elevator and press the button to close the doors. The window in the elevator lobby was open. Cold air rushed in, slicing across my face like a blade. Chapter 3. For once, Chad didn't work late. Early that evening, he showed up downstairs at my office to pick me up after work. Maybe this is how guilt looks on a man. Gone was his usual "I'm swamped," replaced with "I made time on purpose. I wanted to spend the evening with you." I swallowed the nausea churning in my chest and forced a smile. On the way home, I stared blankly out the window. Suddenly, Chad asked, "Did anyone say anything to you today?" I pulled my gaze back and joked lightly, "What, feeling guilty about something?" I had no intention of confronting Chad. But the car slowed noticeably. A flicker of unease crept into his otherwise composed expression. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not guilty of anything. When people lie, they tend to raise their voices on purpose. Just like Chad was doing now." That morning, as soon as I got to the office, a coworker grabbed me the moment I sat down and pulled up a bizarre post online. A male coworker had a pair of lace panties stuffed in his jacket hood. He said they belonged to his wife. And the entire office believed him. My coworker laughed as she commented, "Kids these days really know how to play." I laughed along with her, laughing at the internet, laughing at myself. "Every stage of life has its own kind of fun," someone said. You can't blame everything on being young. It was always like this. Every time a man messed up, there was a crowd ready with excuses. He's still young. He just hasn't had enough fun yet. He'll settle down eventually. Men mature later anyway. Chapter 4. Maybe I'm getting older. The sadness only lasted about 3 days. Aside from the first day, when Chad came to pick me up, everything went back to how it usually was. He called to report working late, just like always. Then he came home very late, carrying that same sweet scent with him. And I no longer had to wonder whether this was his first time or a habit. I made up an excuse. I haven't been sleeping well these past few days. If you come home late, just sleep in the guest room. It wasn't really an excuse. I had just found out I was pregnant. The nausea was unbearable. Older generations like to say some children come to repay kindness, and some come to collect debts. I didn't know which kind this baby was. I only knew the timing was wrong. That pregnancy test I had deliberately left on the coffee table that night, I tore it up and threw it into the trash. Chad didn't know. And he probably never would. When he heard what I said, Chad paused for just a moment, then nodded without thinking too much. His trust in me was the same as mine in him. But he had forgotten something. We had once agreed, no matter what happened, we would never sleep in separate beds. Separate beds meant separate people, separate hearts. But if his heart had already wandered, what was the point of lying side by side in the same bed? And all those details I had never cared about before now felt like warnings I had ignored for too long. Every time he took a call at home, he would instinctively avoid me. From the bedroom to the study, from the living room to the balcony. Deliberate, yet not entirely. It made sense, and yet it didn't. I let out a self-mocking breath and rested both hands on my belly, still flat enough that no one could tell I was pregnant. Ridiculous. We had both wanted this for so long. Chapter 5. Chad started getting used to sleeping in separate rooms. On the rare nights he didn't work late, he would shower early and slip into the guest room anyway. He even came up with a careful excuse. I've been exhausted lately. I don't want my snoring to keep you up. I moved my lips as if to say something, but felt nothing at all. The only thing I noticed was that every time I passed the guest room, I could hear him on the phone, his voice deliberately lowered. Relaxed. Cheerful. Maybe even carrying a trace of excitement that came from sneaking around. Who knows? I found myself caring less and less. These days, I hardly even cried. 10 years with Chad felt like a long marathon. I remembered every moment of the struggle. And now, standing at this point, marriage no longer seemed like anything special at all. Saturday came. Chad was working late again. I went to the hospital. There wasn't much deliberation behind it. I had made the decision the moment I realized Chad was having an affair. Chad probably never expected to run into me at the hospital. So when we collided at the corner of a hallway, his hand slipped from the young woman he was supporting. A flash of panic crossed his eyes. But his instinctive reaction was to move her behind him. The girl recovered quickly, lifting her chin in defiance and looping an arm through his. What's wrong, Chad? It hit me all at once. No wonder Chad's driving records had never looked suspicious. He'd been keeping his mistress right at the office. Chapter 6. Our eyes met. We stood there, locked in place, for several long seconds. Chad finally pulled his arm free. Honey, what are you doing at the hospital? Are you not feeling well? The concern sounded perfunctory, almost excessive in how unnecessary it was. I couldn't quite name what I was feeling. Seeing it with my own eyes still stung, but I was calm enough. So I pulled my lips into a passable smile and greeted Chad evenly. What a coincidence. What are you doing here? As I spoke, my gaze drifted back and forth between Chad and the young woman, before finally settling on her. I looked her over from head to toe. Young. Pretty. Young, and brazen. Chad's response came out uneven, hesitant. She's not feeling well. I brought her in to get checked out. What about you? Why are you at the hospital alone? I figured I should at least pretend to be surprised. Maybe a little angry. So I pointed at the girl. Then who is she? As I lifted my hand, I noticed my fingers trembling slightly. Just like Chad's voice. She's a new intern at the company, he said. We work overtime together every day. It messed up her cycle. See? Chad had found himself a reason that sounded almost reasonable. But what kind of intern tells her male supervisor that her period is irregular? I took a step back, pressed down the bitterness rising inside me, and replied lightly, playing along. Then yes, that really is your fault. Chapter 7. After all these years with Chad, we rarely fought. We rarely even got angry. So he didn't notice how hard I was forcing my composure. He scratched his head and laughed along. Yeah. Then I'll take her to see the doctor first. You'll be okay, on your own, right? I hadn't had time to answer. The girl was already shaking her head, tears pooling in her eyes. It's my fault, sister-in-law. I've never come to the hospital by myself before. That's why Chad came with me. I can manage on my own. Chad, you should stay with your wife, she said. That's what she said. But the hand gripping the hem of Chad's jacket didn't loosen at all. Chad's expression darkened. His reproachful, dissatisfied gaze swept over my face, then shifted away. Right. I clearly wasn't showing any extra emotion at all, so how could he possibly blame me? It's fine, I said. I don't need anyone with me. It's nothing serious. You should go ahead and see the doctor. Don't miss your turn. As I spoke, I gestured toward the clinic's check-in board outside. Hearing me relent, Chad's rigid posture finally relaxed. Okay, he said. If you need anything, call me. He reminded me. This time, the concern sounded sincere. After all these years together, I could tell the difference. Maybe it was because I hadn't made a scene. I curved my lips into a smile and nodded. I stepped around them and walked straight toward the operating area. Chad didn't notice at all. It had been a very, very long time since I had last reached out to him on my own. Calls. Messages. Even at home, we barely spoke anymore. Chapter 8. By the time I came out of surgery, it was nearly dark. Chad had called me several times. I saw the missed calls during post-op observation, but I didn't want to answer. When I got home, Chad was there, rarely so. Even rarer, he was wearing an apron, busy in the kitchen. Why are you back so late? I called you so many times, and you didn't pick up. I was worried sick. Just words. If he had truly been worried, he would have done what he used to, call everyone around me until he found me. The doctor had said I needed rest, and more importantly, peace of mind. I pressed my lips together and gave a few perfunctory replies. Chad wasn't really listening anyway. He hurriedly brought the dishes to the table, pulled out a chair, and gestured for me to sit. I made your favorites, he said. Spicy braised pork and a hot stew. Try some. I didn't. I didn't even pick up my chopsticks. Not because the doctor had forbidden it, but because I don't like spicy food. I never have. I used to eat it only because Chad liked it. Do you want some soup first? I went to the market this afternoon to get fresh ribs. He was being attentive to the point that it almost made me laugh. The last time I remembered him wearing an apron and cooking soup was before we got married. Back when we were discussing wedding arrangements. He had gone all out, cooked a full table of dishes. Between the lines, he kept hinting at whether my family could ease up on the wedding expenses. We had already been together for 5 years then. 5 years. He knew exactly how to read my emotions. He knew I wouldn't mind. He knew I would talk my family into it. Chapter 9. People say men change when they get rich. For the first time, that saying carried an undeniable weight for me. That day was the second time I ran into the girl. About half a month later. At the wedding of one of Chad's college roommates. Another long relationship coming to an end, sealed with vows. Compared to the rushed, budget-conscious wedding Chad and I had held back then, this one was meticulous, lavish in every detail. The room was filled with classmates and friends. While I was pulled aside into conversation, Chad slipped out of my sight. I wasn't looking for him exactly. I was just curious why the girl was there too. Oh, her, someone said. She's Mark's cousin. Didn't Chad tell you? I heard your Chad was the one who arranged for her to get hired at the company. The classmate looked a little surprised. I froze, my hand at my side curling unconsciously. Mark, the groom. No wonder. No wonder she was there. I didn't say anything more, but questions kept circling in my mind, one after another. That was, until I went to the restroom and ran straight into Chad and Mark, standing together and smoking in low voices. The wedding hadn't even started yet. The groomsmen were still greeting guests at the entrance. "Chloe's here today too," Mark said. "Be careful. Don't let Anna find out." "Oh. Anna was me." Chad let out a light laugh. "Anna's simple to a fault. She won't notice anything. Last time I took Chloe to the hospital, Anna saw us and didn't say a word." "Oh, right, and you? I heard Chloe say you got her friend a job at your company too?" The wedding that followed was dazzling. And all of it was fake. Chapter 10. After the wedding ended, Chad had a bit to drink. He couldn't hold his liquor and ended up asleep on a sofa near the hotel entrance. I couldn't move him. And I didn't want to. Chloe stepped forward on her own, her pale, flawless face lit with a bright, effortless smile. For a split second, it dazzled me. When Chad and I started dating, he was the one who pursued me. It wasn't until after we became official that I realized I had been his second choice. Later, though, he treated me so well that I forgot. And Chloe. She looked a lot like the girl he used to like. Old in the same way. "Sister-in-law, I wanted to say hello earlier during dinner," she said. "It just got busy, and I forgot." "Chad's had too much to drink, hasn't he? I'll help you support him. I've always been the one to take him home after work dinners anyway." I let go. I let her loop her arm through Chad's. The car was parked in the garage. She already knew the license plate, but I told her again anyway. "Sure. Then I'll trouble you to get him to the car." "I'm going to the restroom," I said. I had consulted a lawyer. I barely had any concrete evidence that Chad was cheating. If there was none, then I would create it. I connected the car's dashcam feed to my phone. After Chloe helped Chad into the passenger seat, she reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck. Her fingers played with his hair as she said softly, "Chad, stop pretending. Do you really think I don't know whether you're drunk or not?" Chad opened his eyes and grabbed Chloe by the chin. Cars were coming and going in the parking garage. And yet they kissed anyway. People online say that once you chase excitement, you'll keep chasing it. Turns out, they're right. Chapter 11. The lawyer advised me that before a divorce, it was best to get a clear picture of the couple's shared assets. For someone like Chad and me, married for 5 years, it was easy for things to blur together. I didn't even know whether I should feel happy or relieved. When I suggested doing some financial planning, Chad just let out a surprised, "Wow." He helped me organize every piece of documentation we had: property, cars, savings, stocks, funds. All of it. "What made you suddenly want to look into this?" he asked. "Back then, when I said we should let you handle the household finances, you said it was too much trouble." Chad had never been guarded with me. Even now, I still believed that. Except for what was happening between him and Chloe. I pressed my lips together and let out a soft, self-mocking laugh. Laughing at how, in this moment, our relationship still looked as if no cracks had ever formed. I casually scrolled through Chad's online banking. The transfer records looked fairly clean. Most of the transactions were between him and me. His salary went to me. Strictly speaking, into an account opened under my name. After marrying Chad, he had handled almost all of our finances. I didn't understand investing, and I was always afraid of being scammed. "I'm getting older," I said lightly. "Seeing money makes me feel secure." I rested my chin on my hand, watching Chad stand by the desk, focused on making spreadsheets for me, as if nothing had ever changed. He frowned. And that was all, just a frown. "All right," he said. "Your husband's giving you plenty of peace of mind. It's all here. If anything doesn't make sense, call me. I need to take a call." Chapter 12. Chad was impressive, really. Managing me, and managing someone else at the same time. His phone sat on the desk, ringing non-stop. I glanced at the screen. It was Chloe. I didn't ask anything. Not until he picked up the call and left the study did I finally let out a quiet sigh. Sighing at the fact that he could love me and still betray me, sighing at the fact that I loved him and still had to let go. Truthfully, I rarely checked Chad's phone. The passcode was my birthday. It had never changed all these years. I used to say that if a man doesn't want you to know, checking his phone won't help anyway. But that day, after the wedding, while he was in the shower, I looked. I couldn't stop myself. Even though I knew there wouldn't be anything there. And sure enough, his messages with Chloe showed nothing out of the ordinary. Almost all of it was work-related. Chloe reporting progress, sending summaries. Chad replying with, got it, and okay. Which made sense. Not deleting anything would be too reckless. Deleting everything would look too suspicious. Chad was careful enough to keep his affair perfectly measured. I opened Chloe's social media page. Her cover photo was a sweet photo of two people seen from behind, and her bio read, I love him wildly, fiercely, without restraint. In the picture, Chad had deliberately styled his hair. From the back, he looked almost boyish. If that jacket hadn't been custom made at my request, I probably wouldn't have recognized him either. By the time I saved the recordings and sent everything to my lawyer, Chad and Chloe had just ended their call. Chapter 13. I never attended Chad's company parties. So when he asked me, like he did every year, he probably assumed I would say no again. Which was why, when I said sure, his mouth fell open in shock. The two of us sat across from each other at the dining table. Yet it felt as though a chasm lay between us. He had things on his mind. So did I. Why did you suddenly want to go this year? Chad slid a glass of milk toward me, putting on an air of casual normalcy. I took it and took a small sip. It was after Mark's wedding, I said. I found out several of our college classmates have transferred to your company. Before, I thought it'd be awkward since we weren't close. Now that doesn't really apply. I thought the excuse was solid enough. Much like the one Chad had used when he told me Chloe's cycle was irregular. And conveniently, those classmates hadn't shown up at the wedding, which made the idea of catching up sound even more reasonable. Chad let out a dry chuckle, quickly masking whatever he felt, and even suggested taking me to the mall to pick out an outfit for the company gala. Neither of us expected to run into one of his coworkers there. Wow, sister-in-law, you really pulled something impressive, she said. That lace underwear we saw at the office last time, everyone was laughing so hard. You have no idea how pale Chad looked that day. He spent forever explaining it to everyone. The coworker laughed so hard she nearly doubled over. The smile on Chad's face vanished instantly. Panic filled his eyes as he instinctively looked at me, mouth opening, but no words came out. I thought about how pale Chad's face must have been that day. It was probably just as white now. Chapter 14. Chad picked out a lot of clothes for me. He was so guilty that swiping his card seemed to be the only way he knew how to erase what had just happened. And I didn't want to confront him yet either. So I simply acted as if I had forgotten it completely. Except that whenever he tried to kiss me, I would find an excuse to dodge it. Back when we were dating, Chad was always like this. He believed that intimacy between partners could solve anything. Like the idea that arguments disappear once you share a bed again, as if closeness alone could erase every marital conflict. Back then, I always thought arguments were trivial. As long as it wasn't a matter of principle, I could look the other way. But now, I couldn't anymore. I knew clearly that I loved him, the version of him who once loved only me. And I also knew just as clearly that he loved me, and that it didn't stop him from betraying me. That night at dinner, Chad finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He took the initiative to explain himself. Or rather, he struck first. Honey, I feel like you don't love me anymore. As he spoke, he peeled shrimp for me. I froze, the piece of braised meat I'd been holding slipping back into my bowl. My heart ached with it. I looked up at him and asked with a smile. How do you know? My smile must have startled Chad. He panicked, jumped up from his chair, and dropped to one knee in front of me. What my coworker said this afternoon while we were shopping, you didn't react at all. You didn't doubt me. You didn't ask me anything. You don't care about me anymore. People around the restaurant turned to look. Just like the year Chad had proposed to me. Chapter 15. Chad's explanation was that he had bought me a few sets of lingerie. Lace-trimmed, meant to add some excitement to our marriage. Maybe he hadn't paid attention while opening the package. I didn't listen to the details. They were fake. I couldn't take them in. I only responded perfunctorily, I didn't ask because I trust you 100%. You'd never betray me. To put Chad at ease. Or rather, to lower his guard. That night, as expected, Chad brought a lace lingerie set in front of me. This was the outcome he wanted. And I went along with it. I laughed and scolded him lightly, then pushed him out of the master bedroom. My period's here. I'm not wearing it. Go sleep in the guest room. Yes. From the moment we started sleeping separately, Chad never once suggested coming back to the master bedroom. He had his late-night conversations. I had my own plans. Chad shrugged, wearing an expression like he'd seen right through me. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't wear it. So I regretted buying it the moment I opened it, he said. For Chad to keep a lie intact to this extent meant he had put real effort into it. From outside, he gently closed the door to the master bedroom. The smile I had been holding at the corner of my mouth finally collapsed. I wouldn't say I was sad. But I still found myself thinking about the early days of our marriage, and Chad remembered my cycle better than I did. And now, when the dates were off by so many days, he didn't even bother to ask. 5 years slipped by in the blink of an eye. Thinking about it now felt strangely unreal. Chapter 16. Later on, people often asked me whether I had anticipated that something would happen between Chad and Chloe at the company gala. I laughed it off and denied it. It was just a gamble. 10 years with Chad, I had thought about ending things peacefully. Sitting down together, talking it through. But I was afraid. Afraid that in the years to come, I would hate, and I would regret. Hate Chad for betraying promises after all those years of love. Regret that because I had loved him for so long, I chose to let him go without consequences. So I decided to try. Following my lawyer's advice, I gathered as much evidence of Chad's affair as possible. Whether through negotiation or litigation, once things were torn open, perhaps I would never look back again. Maybe it was fate. I never intended for everything to become public, but in the end, it did. Chad's company gala was held aboard a luxury cruise ship. 3 days and 2 nights. Dance floors, parties, champagne. Chad stayed by my side almost the entire time. Several times, I urged him to go drink and chat with his colleagues, but he kept staying with me. And across the crowd, he exchanged lingering, ambiguous looks with Chloe again and again. Until Chloe finally walked over with a glass of wine. "Long time no see," she said to me. "I'd like to have a drink with Chad." Chad smiled and clinked his glass against hers. I took a sip of orange juice. After that, Chloe simply took a seat beside us. It wasn't until Chad was dragged away by a few coworkers that she finally spoke, slowly and deliberately. "Do you want a divorce?" Chapter 17. To be honest, I was taken aback. Chloe said she had seen me coming out of a law firm. One that specialized in divorce cases. I smiled. I was visiting a friend. She'd just transferred to that firm. That wasn't exactly a lie. The lawyer I'd hired had indeed just moved there. Recommended by a friend. A friend of a friend, close enough. Chloe paused slightly. After a long moment, she took a sip of her drink. "You scared me. I thought you were going to divorce Chad." She said it while patting her chest. There was a trace of disappointment she didn't quite manage to hide. "If I ever decide to get a divorce, I'll let you know," I said. I didn't feel like continuing the conversation with Chloe, so I stood up and made an excuse. "Sorry, I'm feeling a bit dizzy. If you see Chad, could you tell him I went back to the room first?" Chloe agreed. But when I returned to my room, Chloe went back to hers as well. With Chad. Chloe's room was a shared cabin, occupied with another woman. It was directly across the hall from the room Chad and I shared. When I stepped out to get some air, that other woman was standing stiffly outside the door, her expression awkward. As I walked closer, I heard the intimate sounds of Chad and Chloe inside. What do we do?" "Sister-in-law, it's probably a misunderstanding." The girl sounded like she was on the verge of tears. She was, like Chloe, a new intern. I took the keycard from her hand and asked her to call one of the ship's staff. The door was locked from the inside. The card wouldn't open it. Chapter 18. The world never lacks gossip. It's just that when gossip comes knocking on your door, it's hard to resist looking. So when the door finally opened, a crowd drawn by the commotion had already gathered in a tight circle. I stood at the very edge of the crowd. Watching everyone holding up their phones to record, I knew evidence was no longer an issue. Inside the room, Chloe and Chad were pressed against each other, completely naked. Panic was written all over Chad's face. Chloe dove straight under the covers. The other girl screamed as she dragged her suitcase out, as if leaving it in the room for one more second would contaminate it. There was a flood of voices. Contempt, shock, and hushed whispers. I pushed through the crowd and walked inside. Then I met Chad's face, already drained of all color. "Chad, are you out of your mind?" There was no hysterical screaming. No sobbing breakdown. No hair pulling, no slapping, no curses like the scenes I'd seen online. I didn't even feel like acting. The words circled in my mouth for a long time before that was all I said. Maybe it was because my reaction was too calm. Chad's expression changed instantly. He suddenly grabbed Chloe and started shouting at her. "Was it you? Was it you who took advantage of me when I was drunk and dragged me into your room? Chloe, hurry up and explain it to my wife. Tell her you did it on purpose." It wasn't just Chloe who looked stunned. So was I. I even remembered a casual conversation I once had with Chad. I had asked him, why is it that when people get caught cheating, men always blame the woman? Chad had said, if you dare to do it but don't dare to own up to it, what kind of man is that? Exactly. What kind of man? Chapter 19. The cruise ship docked. I took a cab home. Chad and Chloe were still tangled up in their mess, and I couldn't be bothered to care. As soon as I walked through the door, I changed the entry code. I deleted Chad's fingerprint access. I also changed the PIN on the bank card Chad always used to deposit money into. All of it took no more than 5 minutes. I had never imagined that the end of Chad and me would take only these simple 5 minutes. Half an hour later, Chad came back. He stood at the door, trying the code again and again before it finally sank in. He called out for me, calling me his wife, calling my name. Over and over, until it became irritating to listen to. Someone in the building complained about the noise. I sent a small apology payment and added a brief note, "Sorry about the noise, caught my husband cheating and locked him out." I took a screenshot and sent it to Chad. The noise stopped. The women in the group started liking my message one after another. That night was the soundest sleep I'd had since discovering Chad's affair. The next day, I went to work as usual. I heard Chad did too. As soon as I arrived at the office, a coworker pulled me over to look at that bizarre post again. Can you believe it? There's an update. It turns out it wasn't his wife's at all. It was his mistress from work. I tapped on the poster's profile. The most recent post read, "Both leads showed up to work like nothing happened." I chose to resign. Attached was a photo of the purple suitcase that had been dragged out in a hurry that day. I pressed my lips together. My eyes suddenly burned. I felt sorry for that girl. She probably wouldn't want to share a hotel room with anyone for a long while. Chapter 20. The divorce didn't go to court. Chad agreed to a negotiated divorce. We met in a conference room at the law firm. As we discussed the terms of the agreement, Chad kept tracing the edge of the paperwork in front of him. "Honey, do we really have to divorce?" "I swear it was just this once. I'll put it in writing if you want." His voice was hoarse. Stubble had grown along his jaw. He grabbed a blank copy of the agreement beside him and started writing. I didn't know what he wrote. His hand was shaking, his handwriting ugly and uneven. I couldn't bear to watch. The lawyer glanced at me, then spoke up. "Chad, do you have any additional objections regarding the division of assets?" Chad's hand paused. His shoulders slumped, as if pressed down by something heavy. From the moment he entered the conference room, he hadn't stood up straight once. "No objections," he said. "Whatever my wife decides is fine." Even at this moment, Chad's display of devotion was still perfectly performed. It almost made me laugh. "Then are you willing to leave with nothing?" I asked him. Just as I had expected, he froze for a brief second, then nodded. "Yes. You're my wife. I'll do whatever you say." I looked at the lawyer. She looked back at me. We had talked about this before. Based on my understanding of Chad, a negotiated divorce would never really be a negotiation. Because even if I demanded that he walk away with nothing, he would agree. Because he believed I would eventually come back. That was Chad. He thought grand gestures and emotional promises could buy him the outcome he wanted. An outcome that cost him nothing at all. Chapter 21. In the end, the assets were divided 60-40. I took 60. Chad took 40. It wasn't until we actually secured an appointment to finalize the divorce that Chad seemed to finally believe I was serious. He sat slumped on the couch at home. Disheveled. Unattractive. He was still wearing the same down jacket he'd come home in that night. "Honey," he said. "You're just angry. You're trying to scare me, right?" He looked utterly lost, like a child who'd done something wrong and didn't know what to do next. I shook my head. "I'm serious." The only reason Chad managed to get back into the apartment was because of the police. He had called them, claiming I was refusing to let him enter the home. The officers said it was a civil matter and advised us to handle it properly. Until the divorce was finalized, Chad still had a legal claim to the apartment. When I dragged my suitcase toward the door, Chad stopped me. "You don't even want to be around me anymore?" "Honey, I really know I was wrong." For the first time, I looked at him the way I would look at a stranger. "I don't want to. And I don't feel like it. And one more thing. That pair of lace panties in the hood of your jacket, I saw them that night. Chad, don't drag this out and make it uglier than it already is." It was humiliating. Truly humiliating. But I didn't regret it. If there was anything to regret, it was probably how hastily we had gotten married in the first place. So hastily that it wasn't until divorce that I realized how hard divorce actually is. Really hard. Even getting on the calendar took time. And after that, there was more waiting. Chapter 22. On the day we finally went in to make the divorce official, Chad dragged his feet. He struggled for a month and a half and clung to me for just as long. Flowers and breakfast every morning. Milk tea and cake every afternoon. Showing up downstairs at my office every evening like clockwork to walk me off work. My coworkers teased me constantly. "Anna, you really know how to keep your husband in line." I thought of that post from before and smiled sincerely. "That post," I said. "The male lead is the guy bringing you afternoon tea. After that, no one touched the milk tea or cake anymore. They were passed along to other departments instead." "Honey, do we really have to divorce?" Before a divorce is finalized, there's always a mediation session. In front of the staff member, Chad asked me again. He looked at me with desperate hope. So did the mediator. I took out a thick stack of papers and photos from my bag. I had pulled several stills from the dashcam footage, explicit enough to leave no room for denial. Chad was looking. The staff member was looking too. Until they reached the last page. When the abortion procedure form appeared, Chad's hands began to shake violently, the photos slipping from his grip and scattering across the floor. The staff member bent down awkwardly to pick them up. "When did this happen?" "You never told me you were pregnant." I hadn't planned to tell him. I had never intended to use the unborn child as leverage. Not even as leverage to push the divorce forward. But why should I be the only one to bear this pain? Why should I be the only one who knew? All of a sudden, I wanted him to know. That night, when you tossed your jacket onto the sofa, you didn't notice the pregnancy test report sitting right there on the coffee table beside it. But before, even the smallest sticky note wouldn't escape your attention. As for the abortion, you were at the hospital that day too. Have you forgotten? Chapter 23. After the divorce. A lot of things happened. Chad was fired and later investigated for criminal responsibility. Chloe was fired as well, and the company recovered the misappropriated funds. And Chad's friend Mark, along with his wife, their marriage also came to an end. All of this was told to me later, during a class reunion, by classmates who worked at the same company as Chad. Using company money to chase a girl, he really had the nerve. Good thing you divorced early. And that the assets were clearly divided. No wonder. Back when my lawyer and I were reviewing the finances, we noticed Chad had never transferred a single personal payment to Chloe. It all went through company accounts, they said. He was an executive, after all. Giving Chloe a bigger bonus was far more convenient than spending his own money. If he spent too much personally, you might have started asking questions. And the company had plenty of vendors who offered perks every year anyway. Chad was charged with embezzlement. The case dragged on, and I heard he was sentenced to several years. As for Chloe, most of the money was clawed back by the company, and she was likely blacklisted within the industry. But she probably didn't care. I suddenly remembered how, at that cruise ship gala, she had insisted on talking to me about her views on relationships. Sister-in-law, why did you agree to marry Chad in the first place? Was it really just because of love? I'm different, she had said. I think relationships where everyone gets what they want are just fine. He wants my youth and looks. I want his power and money. Later, I thought seriously about the question Chloe had asked me. Why did I marry Chad? Of course it was for happiness. Marriage is for happiness. And divorce is too. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.